How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com. Hey, welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we're in Portugal again.
We like it here. It's nice.
We love it here. It was supposed to be raining all day today, and the sun came out.
Of course.
While we're in here
on the
working.
Day that we're indoors all day.
I was ready to be soaking wet by the time I got here because it's about a half a mile walk or something like that. Yeah. From the hotel. So I packed in my bag like an underwear, shirt, another pair of shoes, which, by the way, is kind of funny. Kelly, my wife, packed my other pair of shoes, except that she packed 2 left feet. So
this is the downside to keep buying the same shoe.
Yeah, the downside, right? Apparently I had 2 pairs of old shoes hanging out by the door. Anyway, that's not important. What's important is .NET Rocks. Victoria Melnikova is with us today. But before we introduce her, let's roll the music for Better Know a Framework.
Awesome.
All
right, man. What do you got?
This being show 1871, if you go to 1871.pwop.me, pwop.me, that'll bring you to this article in The Byte, which is a futurism.com blog. And it's this. Microsoft will pay you $15,000 if you can get Bing AI to go off the rails.
Oh, man.
Sounds pretty good.
All that Bing the bounty hunter. You think you can outsmart an AI into saying stuff it's not supposed to? Microsoft is betting big that you can't and willing to pay up if it's wrong. In a blog update, Microsoft announced a new bug bounty program vowing to reward security researchers between $2,000 and $15,000 if they're able to find vulnerabilities in its Bing AI products, including jailbreak prompts that make it produce responses that go against the guardrails that are supposed to bar it from being bigoted or otherwise problematic. And otherwise problematic is underlined, meaning there's a link to it. I don't even want to know what that link goes to, but you'll have to figure that out for yourself. To be eligible for submission, Bing users must inform Microsoft of a previously unknown vulnerability that is, per criteria outlined by the company, either important or critical to security. They must also be able to reproduce the vulnerability via video or in writing. So there you go.
Interesting.
Have at it.
Yeah, no, if you can really pull it off. I mean, lots of other LLMs have been breached, so to speak. So.
The guys that work with me, Brian McKay, he was like, I could probably write a bot that'll do that.
Yeah, it's worth some coin. Like, that's not a bad day.
Yeah, it's not a bad day. Well, anyway, that's the story that I have. Who's talking to us today, Richard?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1830, the one we did back in the beginning of the year, January of 23, with Sarah Novotny when we were talking about sustainable open source.
Yep.
And this comment comes from Wojtek, who has been listening to the show for a long time and has written a few comments. He says, "Hi, guys. I have met one major problem when contributing to open source projects, which I use in my work. Large companies add firewall rules to block Git push commands to GitHub."
Why would they do that?
I don't know. It's pretty strange, huh?
Yeah.
So if I find a bug or want to implement a feature, I'm not able to deliver it back properly. So I have to, now he's found a workaround, get this, create a fork in my private Git server and maintain the project privately until the time that I would leave the company. That's one workaround.
Wait a minute, what'd you say?
Just fork it and hold your changes until you go home at the end of the day and then push it up that way. Prepare code on a private machine, even in private time, and push it up as a PR that way, but then I can't test it in production. Or copy paste the files I've changed into the GitHub web UI, which is a little tough if the change is significant, and patch files make this a bit easier, but still problematic.
Wow.
I mean, the other option would be, can you fire up a VPN and go out through that. But I'm sure if they're locking down GitHub, they're probably looking for VPN connections too, and you'll have InfoSec landing on you in a big hurry. But imagine that this company, I think what he's saying here is that this company is using open source, but blocking folks from contributing back to open source.
That's not right.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
Wojtek, feel your pain, man.
Serious.
And a copy of Music to Go By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Go By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com. Or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Go By.
And you can follow us on Twitter if you want, but or X or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. But the real cool kids are over on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
And send us a toot, and we will read them.
Mm-hmm.
We may not answer, but we will read.
We do the best we can.
Yeah.
I should be reading comments from Mastodon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's bring on Victoria Melnikova. And she works for a company named Evil Martians.
Are there any other kind of Martians, really?
I mean, really, if you think about it, no.
I don't think so.
Maybe we're talking microbes. Are microbes evil? I don't know if you could call them.
Microbes.
They aren't. Okay. So alongside Evil Martians, Victoria Melnikova connects with technical leaders, particularly in developer productivity space, and empowers growth stage startups on their journeys to success. Victoria is the author and creator of Dev Propulsion Labs, a podcast about building successful developer tools. Welcome to the show.
That is correct, and thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. What do you think about blocking pushes to GitHub?
That's one way to block innovation in a company.
Yeah,
That's
no
what
kidding.
I think.
Yeah.
At the same time, maybe we should, get Bing AI to do that task, and maybe that's how we can derail it.
There you go. We'll split the money. Okay. We have done quite a few shows on open source and commercial interests, and it seems like the landscape is getting more and more screwed up, right? Because of commercial interests. The big companies are getting involved now, and nobody really has I don't know. It seems to me like nobody really has a plan of how to do this right. What do you think?
It's interesting because I'm more familiar with the other side of open source, with the indie side and startup side of open source. Mm-hmm. And that space is growing and thriving, and it's as beautiful as ever. So I'm sure that on the big company side, on enterprise side, it's quite challenging, and there are a lot of limitations, and, I don't know what the landscape is looking like, but overall in the dev tool industry, I feel like we're doing great.
But you're working with startups.
Yes.
So they're almost certainly using open source software.
Yes.
But are they making open source software
Yes.
too? Okay.
Yes.
And yet they're startups, so they're being funded by investors who want to see a return. How do those investors feel about open source software?
That's actually a great question, and I think we see a surge of very exciting startups like Supabase, Call.com, Neon Database, and other companies that are actually profiting hugely by open sourcing. So they offer a free offering to their users.
Right.
Getting a huge kind of user base, getting feedback, tightening those feedback loops. So in the end, they end up with the great product, and they sell enterprise plans to big companies, and they still make a ton of money with that. So
this is sort of the classic open source model of there's a free product with minimal support.
Yeah.
And if you are using it at a pro level, then buy the support contracts.
Exactly. It's kind of like the open core business model. When you have free open core that's available to everybody, depending on the license, there are limitations, but still. And the pro features or support, as you mentioned, comes at a price.
Sure. I mean, there's always a wrestling match then with, are there features in the pro edition only or the enterprise version only? How do you keep them in sync? Like, is it a common code base? Because I always worry that the open product gets left behind.
Yeah.
Well, a smart way to do it is to limit it by the number of users that you're supporting, right?
Yeah.
Because then you have the full product with all of its features. You You're not limited. You're only limited in scope by the size of the audience that's using it.
It's an interesting question. I think I have a couple of great examples. So, for example, Evil Martians, also we create a lot of open source projects, and historically we've been a Ruby on Rails development shop. Mm-hmm. But over the years we really delved into other languages like Go and Rust and others. But in Ruby on Rails specifically, we created a lot of projects that are forever open source. They're free. Mm-hmm. People use them all the time. Mm-hmm. But there is an example, AnyCable, for example, it has, a free version, free tier. Mm-hmm. And you would only need AnyCable Pro if you need to do something really advanced.
What is AnyCable?
AnyCable is real-time in Ruby on Rails applications.
Real-time what?
Real-time everything.
Real-time everything.
Collaboration. Yeah.
So sort of a WebSocket kind of thing?
Kind of, yeah. So it's chats, notifications, that sort of thing, uses AnyCable.
Okay. And do you set a limit on the free version then? Like what would make people upgrade to Pro?
If they need some custom development, for example, right, or they need some custom configuration and they cannot resolve the situation. Another example is image proxy. It's image optimization on the fly. So image optimization, basic image optimization will forever be free, but custom watermarks is not. So that's a very clear kind of like water.
So wait, does the free version put a watermark in there?
No. For example, you have a business and you want to put watermarks to all your images.
Sure.
So if you pay whatever it is, for image proxy, then you get that functionality. Or for example, smart object detection.
Is that a client-side technology or a server-side technology?
It's server-side.
Server-side.
Yeah.
Okay. But, and in both cases, it's like the customer opts to buy the Pro product. There's no limits on the free product. No limits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is there cases where the limit makes sense?
Perhaps. If it's very expensive to run it. Like, for example, if it's something that if we hosted image proxy as SaaS, that would be perhaps a question, how many people we want to let on to it for free. But since people just spin up a Docker container and do it on their own, cloud, it's
not a big deal.
Not a big deal for us.
Yeah. We've recently had this controversy with Unity where, and it very much read to me, as much as it went poorly, with the, hey, if you're making money, we want to cut kind of mindset. And I think it's an interesting...
It'd be a shame if anything ever happened to your software, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and now the CEO's decided to retire. Like, obviously, this did not go well for Unity.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've run into these models. Like, there's one thing of you're building it for your company makes money some other way, and it grows to a certain size, and it costs you overhead. It's like, hey, we need to charge you, or you want certain features there. Yeah. As opposed to you create a tool that's inside of our product, and we sell that product, and we're making millions.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I want to approach it from two ends. I recently had a guest on my show. I'm soon launching the second season of Dev Propulsion Labs. And in that season, I have 10 DevTool founders that are some of them are doing commercial open source and some are not. Right. Differs. But one of my guests is Miško Havery, and he's the creator of AngularJS and Quick, and now he is working as a CTO at Builder.io. So he created Angular within a big company, right? Yep. And you get access to resources you wouldn't have otherwise, Yeah, and yes, it exists within a big enterprise, but so many people benefit from AngularJS just being available as a framework. So, I don't see a problem with it per se, but sometimes it could be problematic.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great schism, and it's one of all these are aspects we've been exploring, just trying to figure out, like, what are the right ways to go about this for folks? Because it does seem reasonable to want to make money from your work.
Yeah.
And at the same time, not be seen to be deceiving anyone either.
Yeah. I actually have a very hot take on this because I believe that the only way to do open source sustainably is to commercialize it.
Interesting.
And the reason for that is because I work with engineers all the time, right? And I know that in the open source industry, the burnout is very much real.
Sure.
And if you're not being sustained by the project that you're investing your time and then like every single day, basically, how are you going to do it for 10 years, for 15 years? It's impossible, you know? And I've seen really amazing examples. For example, Mike Perham in Ruby on Rails space, he created Sidekick. And Sidekick is the background jobs for Ruby on Rails. It's very kind of well known in the Ruby on Rails community. And so basically his approach, I think, is kind of the ideal situation for commercializing open source. He was working with Ruby on Rails a lot. He found a problem and he's like, I want to create a solution for this, but in order to make it sustainable, I need to be smart about how I approach this. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that it pays for my living. So I can invest 8 hours per day into creating an awesome product. And he started documenting his steps every single day. So at some point, he created a product that was great. He is a great Ruby on Rails engineer. He, did a great product. And he kind of told his audience, look, guys, it's available for free right now, but to make sure that I'm able to do this for many years to come, I'm going to turn it into a paid product. You can choose to stay on this free tier, but, I'm not going to maintain it anymore. And if you have any issues, you'll have to resolve them by yourself.
Right.
But my capacity is limited and I want to make sure that my project, the Sidekick product, is amazing for years to come. And basically that's how he did it. Right. And he is a one-person show still, and I think he is at like 5 million ARR at this point. And it's extremely impressive. He is able to do what he loves, and it's,
Do you think the transparency in the way he approached it was important?
Extremely.
Yeah.
I would say extremely. So the two things that I notice that are extremely important are boundaries, setting very strict boundaries, and being transparent about it. I think those are the two core values in commercial open source.
Right. I mean, we've certainly talked to folks who started out just making an open source thing and then hit this point where it's like, oh, I need to charge for this. And then people get really angry with it, like you're just trying to cash in.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, they're like, the alternative is I abandon it? Like, what do you want?
It's actually crazy. So, the principal front-end engineer at Evil Martians created PostCSS. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's a pretty well-known framework in the front-end world.
What's it called?
PostCSS.
Oh, PostCSS. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't want to say all the front-enders use it, but a lot do.
Okay.
And, so it's not monetized, right? It's completely free, and he spends a lot of time maintaining this project along with others. And, the main, source for folks like Andrei to receive money on that is to get donations from people, that support his project, that use his project in their commercial products or whatever.
Right.
And it's just $12,000 a year. Like you cannot survive.
It's not sustainable. No.
It's not sustainable. And one of the things about open source is that people are very vocal, but they're particularly vocal about things that don't work. So if you read negative comments, if something breaks, about it firsthand.
And they'll drag you down too.
And it's really hard to stay motivated when you're drowning in this negative feedback.
Yeah.
There's very little support that you get, and over the years, it's just becoming this burden. So, I do believe that monetizing open source is the way to go.
Certainly a way to support it. I mean, I'm looking at PostCSS, and he has had a bunch of contributors over the years. I mean, clearly, he does the vast majority of the work.
Yeah.
I got to think that having some contributors helps.
Yeah, I mean, people also help to adapt it to different frameworks. So it's kind of like the ecosystem is growing, but the core code is mostly him. Yeah.
And so a lot of these, I'm surprised at how used to looking at like a contributor graph and so far I've gotten to now. It's like, how is this being worked on? It's like, it's clearly one person, and then there's a dozen people that built something in a narrow period of time, probably, some of the cross-platform implementations, and then went away.
Yeah.
Little spikes like that. It's a signature.
Exactly.
Yeah, for better or worse. That, 10 years he spent on PostCSS.
Yeah. It takes a long time.
And also just the commitment.
Yeah.
And of course, the answer to half the cursing and yelling is like, would you like your money back? Really? It's free. What are you doing?
Yeah. And he has a handful of projects. It's not just post CSS. It's a lot. So it really is, a second job.
Yeah, easily. But also, I mean, I don't know that I've ever met him. I don't think I've ever met Andre, but I have a sneaking suspicion of the kind of personality, we've certainly met a few, the folks that can do that and tolerate a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
And still keep making a thing. They're an unusual breed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I admire him. He's very strong, for sure.
Yeah, keep doing the things that are important that you value, and making a tremendous amount of software along the way.
Yeah.
But also, how does he make a living?
He works at Evil Martians.
Right. Yeah. So then he also has a job on top of all of it.
Exactly.
Do you think sometime in the future, the way AI innovation is going, that GitHub will have some, or what other repositories will have some sort of intelligent assistant that will suggest ways that you can improve your project, maybe even find bugs, maybe help as that sort of, help that maintainer do their job better or more productively?
There is one thing that AI lacks is the creative thinking, the critical creative thinking. And I feel like engineers are really good at that. Great engineers are really good at creating elegant, simple solutions for very complex problems. And I think the more advanced the engineer is, the simpler the solution is. So, and I'm not sure if AI at this stage is capable of that per se.
I don't think it is right now, but I mean, the way it's going, it's innovating at quite a clip.
Hopefully in the future. I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing. Yeah. To be honest, I'm that scares me.
I would also counter that concept of we've hit a wall, it seems, with the large language model. It's now big enough that there's very few places capable of making a new one. There's really no GPT-5 on the horizon. We need a new algorithm, I suspect. Yeah. I appreciate the tool for its idea to stimulate creativity in me.
For sure.
That going from a blank screen to a bunch of copy, however messed up that copy may be, at least is stimulus for, how would you shape this up? What would you do with it? Whether that's code or copy or whatever it may be. It's that's what these tools seem to be good at so far.
Yeah, I'm also really hopeful about the image manipulations because, for example, my husband and I were creating an illustration book for kids, and we've used ChatGPT, for some sense of direction for the text, but for the illustrations to get inspiration, to get quick kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
Explore an idea.
Explore ideas quickly. Cheaply, Mid-Journey is the perfect thing. And so at Evil Martians, once again, we have a new product. It's called Canfi. And basically you can think about it as AI assistant for documentation and support for DevTools. So, some companies, especially when they deal with with a bunch of different languages, their support have to deal with a lot of tickets that are very time consuming because they're different and they cover a vast majority of questions. And training a model to do that efficiently, use previous experience and, responses makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Especially when people take a screenshot of the code and they're like, I ran into a problem. How can you resolve this?
Yeah. What am I looking at?
I've had a lot of experience with GPT in various milieus. And I find that it does its best work at writing code. And, when you ask it to be an authority on something, it falls short and it can hallucinate. But code is something that it does very well. And it's very easy to verify and it's easy to test. And so I kind of think that there's a lot more innovation coming in code writing and in code, whatever you want to call it. Copilot is a great example of that, but I think that's where the real innovation is going to happen.
Hopefully.
In the future.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either, but that's my thought.
I really like using AI Should I even say AI?
No.
I don't know.
Shouldn't.
GPT. I don't know.
It's better to refer to the products.
Okay.
Because AI is such a generalized term.
And it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm so used to using it as a day-to-day kind of term, but I understand that it's not the proper name for it.
Well, and the big concern for me is that everybody else has a different interpretation of it. So it's like we're creating a larger delusion when we use these imprecise names.
And now cars are built with AI.
It's kind of
you're
like
going to see refrigerators with AI. It's like, come on.
Yeah. It's kind of like the craze with the Web 3. It's kind of the same thing. Like nobody understands what it is, and people throw this word around not knowing what it really is. But anyways, I was going to say that I use language models and ChatGPT in particular to actually save time on tedious tasks.
Yeah.
That's what I prefer to use it for. And I think we can get a lot of help with that, for developers.
Saving time on tasks is always a good thing. Then it just makes it another tool, but they're still your tasks.
Yeah.
And these tools make it a little faster. I mean, I really appreciate your point of view on the image thing. And I've seen a few different types of projects where they use the generators to do the prototype imaging and then ultimately went to graphic artists to get originals drawn that they could control the copyright on and all those sorts of things. So, but it was at least a tool to help you explore these ideas. And I got to interrupt for one moment for this very important message.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world. NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. Go to ndcporto.com to register. And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com. Hey, Carl here. We have some news from our sponsor, Text Control. They just released version 32, can you believe it, of their document processing library, which includes new core functionality like document footnotes, SVG export, and much more. Integrate document editing, signing, collaboration, and PDF processing into your ASP.NET Core and Angular applications with TX Text Control. Powerful libraries let your developer teams focus on their core competencies while Text Control handles your digital document processing. Check out all the new features and see the technologies in action by visiting the live demo at demos.textcontrol.com.
And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. Let's call Franklin.
Hey.
And we're talking to Victoria Melnikova, a bit about Evil Martians and this getting commercialized open source. So it's sort of a pattern then of these startup companies building, is it really open source tooling or building products that there happen to also be open source?
I think that the open source is just the philosophy of building products these days. I think it's just a more open, transparent, and I don't know, perhaps idealistic way to build products.
Yeah, I mean, because the big tech giants now are mostly making open source products the same way. Like, it's table stakes. I can't really sell this product if I don't like the source code open.
Yeah.
For a lot of product anyway, not everything.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about the model of, you're obviously about commercialization of open source. We've talked about the model of, limited by users, but that's not always the right model. What are some of the other models that we haven't talked about of commercialization?
So I think that, for example, with image proxy, you can limit the number of instances. So if it's image optimization, you can limit the amount of requests or whatever it is that people can make. Because if a huge company uses image proxy, for free, then it's a little bit of a poor example, because I think with image proxy, the free option is limitless. But when it comes to the paid tiers, then the tiers are based on the number of instances that you spin up. So, and
there's
that
also
makes
a relationship
sense
there with the overhead for the company too.
Yeah.
Like all of those things are being processed on their cloud account and they're paying for them.
Yeah.
So you might call throttling one model, whether it's throttling by number of users or number of instances or number of times that you can access, that you can process an image.
Yeah. Then there is the consulting kind of model, kind of like Red Hat. What Red Hat does, is when the product is free, but all the support and all the service around it is not.
Right. And they're kind of incented to write bad documentation.
Or make the product so complex that it requires your help in order to use it.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for the righteous cycle there. Like we know why Microsoft gives away .NET and all those things, because they want it to run on their cloud.
Yeah.
And so if you have access to all that product, you'll run it on their cloud, and make money that way. Like, it's not altruistic.
Yeah.
It's a business.
It is.
And Google does the same thing with a bunch of their stack. And
Google.net. There's .NET on the Google Cloud.
Yeah, for sure.
And Amazon, of course.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what other models are, because I'm thinking about like SaaS and open core, but
SaaS is an easy one. I mean, you use it on our servers and we meter it and you pay for it.
Yeah, and then it makes sense to limit the number of users or number of whatever, You
have a lot of control that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets more complicated to me when you're writing a tool that lives inside of somebody else's product. And, maybe they only use it a little bit and they don't need support because they're good at it. And now it's integrated into their product and helping them make money.
Yeah.
I hate to think it's like a resentment model.
It's interesting because it has to do with licenses, right? Mm-hmm. So you can actually limit that capability with licensing. I'm not going to go into detail about that because I don't want to mess like any definition of licenses.
Oh, you'll make people angry. You're guaranteed, right? Because I was walking towards GPL too, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Here. The two typical ones that I hear about are MIT license and Apache license. Yeah. And MIT is the one that you can build on top of.
Yes.
Actually. So with image proxy, for example, somebody can buy a paid image proxy Pro, and actually build a product on top of it. Okay. And nothing is stopping them because that's the license.
That's the MIT license.
That's the MIT license, yes. And I'm actually not sure. I think Apache is more restrictive, so Apache would not allow you to build on top of that, or I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
Sure.
I'm not an expert in licenses, but if you are considering commercializing open source, you have to research those and choose the right model.
Yeah, and I just wonder if we're not coming back around to some of these copyleft conversations where it's like, listen, if you're going to include this, you need to make a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to contribute and so on.
Yeah.
And I think about, again, our listener at the beginning of the show who wants to do the right thing in open source. It's like, I'm using open source product. I want to contribute back for the changes I need to make that'll be valued by the people, and my company's impairing me.
So, Jeff Atwood, the guy one of the guys behind Stack Overflow, he branched off and wrote from scratch a version of that engine, that community forum engine called Discourse. Mm-hmm. And when we set it up, and by we I mean Richard Morris and I, for the ketogenic forums, the license was, if you want it, just download it. You can run it on your hardware, on your metal, completely free, no problem. But you'll have to, manage it. And then they have various other levels of management as a SaaS product.
Right.
And so we opted for that when money was coming in, and then when the money stopped, we went towards we put it on a box, and so we have to manage it ourselves. But that it requires care and feeding.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to do that.
Trading time for money. But
it's a great product. And I think, that whole SaaS model of commercialization is really good. It's like, look, it's free if you want to run it, but if you don't want the headache, just cough up some money.
Yeah. And it's convenient. But it's tricky for the engineers to figure it out, I think. So if you are just starting out your open source project and you want to commercialize it, I guess open core is the most straightforward solution, or consulting model.
You mentioned open core before, but tell everybody what that is.
So open core is when you have a free offering, something that's completely free and forever will be free, and that's open source. A great example of that is Cal.com. They have free tier for everybody who wants to use it. But if you want to use some, more advanced features that you need for sales or something else, or you need like a huge enterprise plan where you need to manage a team, then you would pay for it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And it's, you think about cal.com, it's about a shared calendar, and that's a pay product. So it's the obvious one. That's hugely valuable. Doing shared calendar well is hard. So that's, you pay for that capability for sure. And I always hope it's and there's a common code base, so everything's patched at the same time and so forth. It's just that the pro versions have more features. But they're all taken care of. So
that's the other model that we didn't talk about that tends to make people angry is when the free version is crippled in some way. And doesn't do all the things that everybody needs to do.
I think that's just poor open core. I think that's just a bad example of open core. Not even bad. It's intentionally bad.
Right.
So.
Do you remember when Microsoft did, Visual Studio that way? They crippled the free product.
The community edition.
Yeah. The community edition wasn't always as good as it is now.
No.
At one point it did, you couldn't do, well, I can't remember what it was, but there were some things that you just needed to do that you couldn't. And now the community edition, you can do everything.
It's perfectly capable.
Perfectly capable of doing everything.
But the crippleware is an out-of-date concept.
It's just not a good idea.
Another example is platform or cloud offering. I think this is the newest one, the hottest one. And one of the great examples is Vercel. They have, the cloud that you can use, but they also have, Next.js and some other frameworks that you can use for free. So
not quite as turnkey as SaaS, but
it's interesting because it's kind of like neighboring products under the same umbrella, but
you still have to put them together.
Yeah. And they're like a perfect match. So you're inclined to use them together, but it's not expected.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you go down a certain path and it gets some traction, gets successful, and then you bump up to a paid version to get some more features, more capabilities. So, it does make an awful lot of sense. I just think that just because you're able to build good software doesn't mean you're able to manage an open source project well, much less be able to manage the expectations of folks when you come to realize limitations. I'm going to need some money here.
Yeah. I would even take it a step further because engineers love to engineer. They love to solve problems. And sometimes it's such a sweet path to take. You can just be engineering, developing, coding away, And then if you're trying to monetize it, some challenges are very uncomfortable. You have to figure out sales, you have to figure out
support,
talking to people, getting feedback, uncomfortable conversations, support, people taking your open source project directions you don't want to take, take it, etc. So it's an interesting mental exercise, I think, for many engineers to try to open source their projects, to try to commercialize their projects. And I think the best way to approach it is by building a community around it. And I think that the community shares the DNA of the creator a lot. So we spoke in the beginning, we spoke about boundaries and transparency, and I think those are the core features of open source too, without it having, to be commercialized, because the way founder sets the tone in the beginning of the community building will define the community itself.
Yeah. It does, again, we're asking people to plan for something they're not necessarily planned for. But I guess the just being open with your community is enough, that you can change your mind and show why you're changing your mind and have a conversation with it. Be open to being persuaded to other methods.
Exactly. And being kind. Because, I think people who create open source are often more advanced engineers, but people who will be using your open source projects are not necessarily advanced engineers.
Right.
And having that mindset that things need to be explicit, things need to be digestible.
Right.
It's not you who is your core user, perhaps.
Almost certainly not,
And a great way to start that is to write a good README.
Yeah. But, you bring up an interesting point, which is the skill that grows you into a good open source maintainer and leader then also starts you down the path of a commercialization path too.
Exactly.
You're already being affected by the consumers of your product and you're talking to them and interacting with them. And so, you can add this other layer of conversation. I mean, the distinction being you are the expert in your own product and you've got more confidence there to have a conversation about building a business plan and so forth, where you're probably going to have less confidence. But it's still the same community. I think there's an honesty to be had there too, to say, I need to find and fix this.
For sure.
I'm interested in feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think a good open source project starts with the real problem, with the painful problem.
Right.
And if you actually are able to resolve it well and talk about it, then people will be inclined to support you and to even want to pay for that product.
Yeah. Give you room.
Because once again, I have conversations with DevTool founders and they talk about it all the time. Sometimes they start a project while they're working full time on another job. They just start an open source project and they get requests from users. Can I get this feature? Can you do this for me, please? Right. Can I pay you for this? Like, this is so great. I'm happy with what it's doing.
Yep.
So it's definitely those two things go hand in hand.
But you also implied the contributor model for compensation doesn't seem to be enough money to matter.
Shareware.
Honestly, okay, think about a huge project that uses, 20, 30, 40 open source projects,
right.
Their dependencies, how to distribute those donations. It's such a tricky question actually to figure out. And I think there is no working solution for that. Yeah. Maybe that's a good idea for a startup.
I would like GitHub to take charge of this in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a problem also that the analytics for open source projects is lacking.
Yes.
So actually creators of open source, they don't know how many people use their project.
Right.
How they use it, etc. So
and when they've tried to find out, they've gotten into trouble with their community because
for sure
they're collecting data they haven't got a right to collect.
Exactly. So it's kind of like a tricky situation, but GitHub does have that information, probably.
Some of it anyway.
Some of it.
Yeah.
So GitHub is probably the only resource that could figure out monetization for it.
I think they do sit in a special place, but I also see, we're headed down the path of a sort of GitHub enterprise mindset where we could make it easier for a company to see how much open source they depend on and how much they depend on it. And then to start putting some math around making contributions back to those projects they depend on.
Yeah.
If you've got a library spread throughout your various internal applications, you want that library to stay healthy because it's going to be a lot of work for you.
For sure.
There's an ROI there that says a reasonable contribution will increase the likelihood you're not going to have problems.
Yeah. Another question is, how do you reward contributors? Mm-hmm. Because, okay, you're the author and creator, the main maintainer, but there are a bunch of other people that also contribute. How do you reward them?
Yeah. Now, I would like to get us to a situation where the original creator is making so much money that those contributors were annoyed with them.
Yeah.
Because I would see that as progress.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, good. We have a new problem because we are addressing the old problem.
Yeah.
It's a good problem.
Yeah, that would be a good problem to deal with about
it's a good problem
being
to
generous to your contributors. That's the whole thing. It's I don't want us to stop because that isn't solved. I'd like to create the next problem here.
Yeah.
So at least we can start heading down that path and saying, well, what's the right things to do?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, in my experience, people contribute to an open source project because they want attention. They want to get noticed.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to get noticed.
Yeah. Having great open source on your portfolio is a great sign, right? Mm-hmm. I know that, for example, Andrzej Sitnik that I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, he actually sends handwritten cards to his main, contributors.
I love that.
That's great.
It's nice. It's a nice touch.
And it's not that many people. He's not spending
It's a handful.
Day.
It's probably 100.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's getting up there. Yeah.
I've a couple trips to the stationery store.
Yeah.
I've been contributing to a bunch of through Patreon to a bunch of things. And a few of them have done stuff like that where it's hey, hop on my schedule for a half-hour chat kind of thing. One-on-one. I'd like to ask you why you're contributing. And I'm just like, that's really clever.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to go out of their way to make an effort towards your project.
Yeah.
To you go out of your way to go back to them too. That's smart. That's a good community.
Yeah. Also, stickers work great.
And the power of stickers.
Collectibles,
Laptop graffiti.
I have sent pizza to a shop
I have too.
that kicked ass and took names for me on a thing. And I just made a couple of calls, knew where it was, knew how many people it was. It's like, and just ordered a bunch of pizza.
Yeah.
Like, thanks, man. Like
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, it's a good thing to do. And it's, you're not going to do it every day. It's a lot of pizza.
And the pizza shows up while they're eating their curry,
And it's a way to try and make a contribution, do something to remind them that you're grateful.
So, tell us about a recent victory that happened at Evil Martians.
There's so many great things. Actually, today we have a launch and product hunt. Today we're launching. So, I want to explain a little bit. So our designers are heavily invested in pushing the envelopes of working with color on web. And they have been really strong advocates of OKLCH color system. Basically, it's the new most progressive way to work with color on the web. It allows you to use P3 GAMU colors, which means that you get access to like 30% more colors on the web. And it's very easy to create accessible and colorful interfaces because you can just use numbers. So it's very like predictable way to work with colors.
Okay.
And they have been creating awesome plugins for Figma and palettes for people to use and break that barrier to entry.
Nice.
For other designers and engineers to start using OKLCH. So today we have a product hunt launch of Harmony palette, which is the UI accessible palette based on OKLCH.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Cool.
That just launched today?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's on right now, so.
Wow. And where can we go check that out?
It's
harmonypalette.com?
You can search Harmony accessible palette Figma and it will give you the Figma file because it's available on Figma.
I think Richard is busy finding it right now.
That's what I do.
It's also Tailwind compatible and is available as an NPM package, so you can download it and play with it if you're a front-end engineer as well.
Very cool.
Awesome.
So what's in your inbox? What's next for you?
Dev Propulsion Labs Season 2. I have I can't even believe the guests that I got to have at this podcast, and I'm very excited about that.
You like podcasting?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun to have conversations.
Sure is.
For sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. Victoria Melnikova, thanks for spending this time with us, and it's great to hear about your successes. And we need to keep this conversation going about open source and commercialization and all of those good things. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. All right, we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and, of course, in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a